For weeks leading up to my 50th birthday, my family had been acting like they were guarding a state secret. They kept telling me, with these knowing little smirks, that I just needed to wait, that something truly big was coming my way. My wife, Eleanor, would just smile this infuriatingly serene smile every single time I tried to pry. "Be patient, Arthur," she'd say, her voice soft, but her eyes dancing with a secret I wasn't allowed in on. "You just have to be patient." It became her mantra, a gentle stonewalling that only fueled my curiosity. My daughter, Chloe, who was 20 and navigating that world between college life and home, would give me these quick, bright smiles and say things like, "Dad, you are going to absolutely love what's coming for the Big 50." Even my son, Leo, who at 23 is usually far too immersed in his own world to give much thought to family occasions, was dropping hints that were vague but insistent. I have to admit, I was more than a little excited. It was infectious, this bubbling undercurrent of anticipation they were creating in the house. A 50th birthday is a milestone, isn't it? It's one of the big ones, a threshold you cross. And I suppose I let myself believe they were planning to mark it in a way that truly mattered. I wasn't expecting some wild, extravagant gesture. We've never been that kind of family. We're comfortable, yes, but we're not rolling in disposable income. Chloe's tuition at the state university takes a significant bite out of our savings every semester, a recurring expense that I was always proud to handle. And just last month, I'd helped Leo with the down payment for his very first apartment, a $4,000 check that stretched us thin, but it felt important. It was a moment he'd remember forever, and that's what fathers are for, right? You stretch, you sacrifice, you make it work for your kids. So with all that in mind, the constant secrecy and whispered phone calls had me convinced they were planning a surprise party. It made perfect sense. It was personal, it was celebratory, and it fit within the reality of our lives. The conspiracy seemed to extend even to my in-laws. My father-in-law, Marcus, called me out of the blue last week, which was an event in itself. He never calls unless he needs a leaky faucet fixed or help moving furniture. He just wanted to casually ask which day I was taking off work for my birthday. I told him I'd put in for the actual day, this past Tuesday, and his response was a satisfied, "Good, good." Except I didn't get the day off. At 6:15 on the morning of my 50th birthday, my phone rang, shattering the quiet. It was my boss. "Arthur, I am so sorry," he started, and I knew what was coming next. "We have a serious emergency at the Northwood development. I need you there." Someone always has to be there, and for the last 15 years, that someone has invariably been me. I called Eleanor from the car, the engine rumbling as I headed away from home instead of toward a day of celebration. I told her I'd be late, that I was so sorry, but I would absolutely be home in time for dinner. Her voice on the other end of the line was strange, distracted. "Oh, okay," she said, a little too quickly. "Actually, that works out just fine." Then she hung up. "No, oh no, honey, that's terrible," or "drive safe." Just that it was fine. The oddness of it pricked at me, but I pushed it away, focusing on the chaos ahead. My entire birthday was spent wrestling with a burst water main and arguing with a subcontractor about faulty equipment. It was a long, muddy, exhausting day. No one at work had a clue it was my birthday. I'm not the kind of guy who broadcasts those things. And besides, I was genuinely looking forward to whatever surprise was waiting for me at home. Driving back that evening, a satisfying wariness in my bones, I felt a fresh wave of anticipation. I even stopped at the liquor store and bought a bottle of the good whiskey, a single malt I'd been eyeing for months. I figured I deserved at least that much. At 5:53 p.m., I finally pulled into my driveway. I noticed right away there were no extra cars lining the street, which was the first little crack in my surprise party theory. So much for that. I walked up to the front door and saw that the house was completely dark, not a single light on. That was more than weird. It was genuinely alarming. Maybe they were all hiding inside, ready to leap out? The house was empty, deathly silent. There were no decorations, no cake on the counter, no notes scribbled on the pad by the phone, just a profound and unsettling stillness. I pulled out my phone. No missed calls, no messages. My heart started to beat a little faster. I called Eleanor. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried Leo next. Same thing, straight to the recorded message. I sent a quick text to Chloe. Hey, where is everyone? Nothing. By 7:30, the sun had set, and I was sitting alone at my kitchen table, the darkness of the house pressing in on me. I just stared at that unopened bottle of expensive whiskey, a knot of real fear tightening in my stomach. My mind, a frantic engine, started racing through the worst-case scenarios. Had there been an accident? A horrible, unthinkable accident? I called the local hospital, my voice cracking slightly as I asked the operator if a family by my name had been admitted. Nothing. I dialed Eleanor's sister, Serena. No answer. It felt like my entire world had simply vanished without a trace. At 8:14 in the evening, still utterly alone on my 50th birthday, I finally broke the seal on the whiskey and poured a heavy measure into a glass. The rich, peaty smell did nothing to soothe the frantic buzzing in my head. The silence in the house was no longer just an absence of sound. It felt like a presence, a heavy blanket smothering me. My mind was a grim slideshow of twisted metal and flashing ambulance lights. That's when, out of a strange, desperate impulse, I decided to check Instagram. It's not a place I frequent. I don't post photos of my meals or document my life. I mainly use it to keep a distant, paternal eye on what the kids are up to, a silent observer in their curated digital worlds. It felt like a final, pathetic resort, a shot in the dark to find a clue, any clue, that they were all okay. My thumb hovered over the little icon, and when I finally tapped it, the screen flared to life, painfully bright in the gloom of the kitchen. I scrolled listlessly through the usual feed of other people's perfect lives. Then I saw it, and the air went out of my lungs. It was a photo posted just 3 hours earlier. My entire family. Eleanor, Leo, Chloe, my in-laws Marcus and Diana, and even Eleanor's sister Serena. They were all there, grinning, their faces sun-kissed and happy, standing on a stretch of pristine white sand against a backdrop of an impossibly blue ocean. They were holding colorful cocktails with little umbrellas in them, all of them gathered at some luxurious-looking beach resort. For a second, my brain refused to process the image. It was a complete and total system error. This did not compute. They were supposed to be here, or, if not here, they were supposed to be in some kind of trouble that I needed to solve. They were not supposed to be on vacation. Then I read the caption, typed by my son, Leo. Family vacation mode activated. He won't even notice we're gone. LOL. He won't even notice we're gone. LOL. The letters seemed to lift off the screen and hang in the air in front of me. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just that they had left. It was that they had turned my absence, my dedication to the work that paid for their lives, into a running joke. The LOL felt like a punch to the gut. It was a laugh at my expense. A public declaration that my existence was so peripheral, so irrelevant, that my own family disappearing for days would be nothing more than a minor detail I might overlook. The comments below were somehow even worse. Eleanor, my wife of 25 years, had replied with a single laughing emoji and the words, "So true." Serena, her sister, had chimed in with a snide remark about workaholic husbands never appreciating the finer things in life. My daughter, Chloe, at least hadn't commented, but she was right there in the photo. She stood between her mother and grandmother, sunglasses pushed up on her head, a wide, carefree smile on her face. She looked like she was having the time of her life, without a single thought for the father she'd left behind in an empty house on his milestone birthday. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at my phone. Time seemed to warp and stretch. I scrolled numbly through more photos they had tagged themselves in. There were group dinners at seaside restaurants, videos of them on jet skis, selfies by a sprawling crystalline pool. Every image was time-stamped, geotagged to a resort in a country I'd never even discussed visiting. The posts had started 2 days earlier. 2 days. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment trip. This was a premeditated act. Have you ever heard that Alanis Morissette song about irony? It's not really about irony. It's mostly just about bad luck. But this, right here, this was true irony. For years, for decades, I have carried a low-grade, constant hum of guilt. Guilt for working too much. Guilt for missing a school play because of a deadline. Guilt for being too tired on a Saturday to be the fun dad. All of it, every extra hour, every missed event, was in service of providing for these people. Chloe's college fund, the one I had religiously fed with $500 every single month since the day she was born. Leo's apartment down payment, the money that meant I couldn't replace my 10-year-old truck this year, the one with the driver's side door that doesn't always shut right. The mortgage on this very house, a payment I have never, not once, been late on. The vacations I told them we couldn't afford because someone always needed braces or a new laptop for school or some other thing that was always somehow more important. Something inside me snapped. The initial shock gave way to a hot, blinding flash of rage, and then, just as quickly, it receded, leaving behind a weird and unsettling sense of calm. It was the calm of a deep, structural certainty, the kind of calm you feel when a doctor gives you a terminal diagnosis and all the little anxieties of daily life just fall away, rendered meaningless. I didn't throw my phone, I didn't scream, I didn't call them and demand an explanation. I just poured another whiskey, the ice cubes clinking softly in the profound silence, and I started thinking. Really, truly thinking. That single searing thought, he won't even notice, became a fulcrum point. The hurt didn't vanish, but it crystallized into something harder and more useful, purpose. My first move was to check our finances. I walked from the kitchen to my small office, the laptop's glow cutting a sterile rectangle of light in the dark room. With steady hands, I logged into our joint bank accounts. My eyes scanned the transaction history, and there it was, plain as day. A $4,000 withdrawal from our joint savings account dated last Friday. $4,000. Exactly the same amount I had transferred to Leo just last month for his apartment. What a coincidence, I muttered to the empty room, the sarcasm thick on my tongue. There was no coincidence here. This was a reimbursement. They had taken the money I'd sacrificed for my son's future and used it to fund their little getaway. The thought was so audacious, so profoundly disrespectful, that it almost made me laugh. It was a clean, transactional insult. Fueled by a new, colder energy, I started digging. I scrolled back through weeks, then months of social media posts. My father-in-law, Marcus, was never one for subtlety. Sure enough, I found his comments littered on Eleanor's and Serena's pages, little digital breadcrumbs leading right to this moment. Vague references to a special family trip he was planning, smug remarks about getting away from it all. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was a meticulously planned operation, executed behind my back, scheduled around my life, and timed for my 50th birthday. By midnight, the initial ragged pain had hardened into something like ice. I was no longer just a wounded husband and father. I was an auditor of my own life. I opened a new folder on my desktop and began the methodical process of documenting everything. I took screenshots of every vacation post, every callous comment, every smiling, sun-drenched photo. I downloaded the bank statements showing the withdrawal. I created a timeline, noting the dates of Marcus's posts, the day Eleanor had lied to me on the phone, the exact moment they had boarded their flight while I was preparing for a birthday I thought we'd share. Here is something people always seem to forget about the quiet, reliable guy, the one who just keeps showing up day after day, fixing the broken things and paying the bills without complaint. We are not oblivious. We notice everything. We see the subtle flicker of annoyance when we talk about work. We hear the lie of omission in a story about a day spent shopping. We remember every promise, every sacrifice, every time we put their needs before our own. And when we have finally had enough, when that deep well of patience finally runs dry, we know exactly where all the bodies are buried. For the next 2 hours, I sat there, bathed in the glow of my monitor, constructing a complete financial accounting of our 25-year marriage. I built spreadsheets, the neat columns and rows a stark contrast to the messy reality of my feelings. Who paid for what? Who contributed what? Who sacrificed what? The numbers didn't lie. They didn't have a hidden agenda or a secret vacation plan. They just told a story, and it was a story my family was not going to like. It was around 2 in the morning when I found something else, something that made the blood freeze in my veins. I was sifting through our shared email account. We've always shared passwords, a practice I suddenly, violently regretted, when I saw statements for a credit card I didn't even know existed. It was in Eleanor's name. I clicked open the most recent PDF, my heart pounding a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. $13,000. That was the outstanding balance. $13,000 in debt, stealthily accumulated over the last 3 years. I scrolled through the itemized charges, and a portrait of a secret life emerged. There were designer clothes, spa days I was never told about, and a shocking number of $200 lunches with her sister, Serena. And then, near the top, were the most recent charges, nearly $6,000, all from the past few days, all from the very resort where they were currently laughing at my expense. I'm not a man who cries easily, but in that moment, sitting in the pre-dawn quiet of my empty house, I felt a hot, painful pressure behind my eyes. These were not sad tears. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. Rage at the deception, rage at the betrayal, but mostly rage at the gut-wrenching realization of how completely and utterly invisible I had become to the very people I had given everything to build a life for. When morning finally broke, it wasn't a relief. It was just a continuation. Sleep had been impossible, a restless state of turmoil where images of smiling faces and credit card statements played on a loop. I showered and dressed for work, moving with a strange, robotic precision. There were still no messages on my phone. No happy belated birthday texts, no "are you okay" calls, nothing. The silence from them was as profound as the silence in the house. Out of a morbid curiosity that felt like picking at a scab, I checked social media again before leaving for work. The digital party was still in full swing. They had posted a new video, this one of Leo and Marcus, arm in arm, belting out a karaoke version of some loud rock anthem I despise. The tagline, posted by Leo, read, "Dad would hate this, LOL." It was another small, deliberate twist of the knife, a performance for their friends, built on a foundation of mocking me. Then I saw a new post from Eleanor. It was a serene photo of her staring at the ocean, a coffee cup in her hands. Her caption? "Pure heaven. So nice to get away from real life for a while." Real life. The words hit me with a dull thud. That's me. I'm real life. I am the mortgage payments, the car insurance, the leaky faucet, the steady paycheck that funds the escape to heaven. I am the tedious, responsible reality that she needed a vacation from. The thought didn't even sting anymore. It was just a fact, a piece of data I logged into the growing file in my mind. I went to work, did my job, and came home to the same empty, silent house. That evening, I poured another whiskey and made some decisions. The time for feeling hurt was over. Now was the time for action. First thing the next morning, day 2 after my forgotten birthday, I called my bank at 9 o'clock sharp. I spoke to a helpful woman in a calm, even voice, and I instructed her to open a new checking account in my name only. I then had her reroute my entire upcoming paycheck via direct deposit into that new account. It was a simple administrative task, but it felt monumental. It was the first financial wall I had ever built in my marriage, a quiet, electronic declaration that the Bank of Arthur was no longer open for public withdrawal. Second, I called my buddy David. He went through a nasty divorce last year, a messy affair that he'd navigated with a surprising amount of grace. I knew he'd have a name for me. "Hey man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need a favor. Do you still have that number for your lawyer?" He didn't ask too many questions, which I was grateful for. He just sensed the gravity in my tone. "Yeah, of course," he said. "Arthur, is everything okay?" I gave him the briefest possible version. "Eleanor and the kids went on a trip. It's complicated." That was all I needed to say. He sent the name and number over a few minutes later with a simple message. "He's a shark. You're in good hands." Third, I spent that evening moving Eleanor's things into the guest bedroom. I wasn't being hasty or dramatic. I was being methodical. This wasn't a fit of pique, throwing her clothes onto the lawn. This was a careful, deliberate act of separation. I took her dresses from the closet, the scent of her perfume clinging to the fabric. I carefully gathered her makeup and jewelry from the vanity we had shared for 2 decades. I folded her nightgowns and stacked them neatly in the guest room dresser. There's a metaphor that kept coming to mind. It's like when you discover termites in the foundation of your house. You don't just get angry at the termites and paint over the damaged wood, pretending everything is fine. That's a fool's game. No, you have to dig down. You have to pull back the walls and find out just how deep the damage goes. You have to assess the rot, see if the core structure is still sound, or if the whole thing is compromised beyond repair. That's what I was doing. I was pulling back the walls of my marriage and examining the rot. And as I placed her pillow on the guest bed, I had a sinking feeling that the damage went all the way to the core. On day 3 of their sun-drenched vacation, which was day 2 of my new solitary life, I finally received the first sign of contact. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and I saw Chloe's name on the screen. For a fleeting second, a foolish flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Then I read the message. "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" That was it. So casual, so breezy, so utterly oblivious to the gaping hole they had torn in our family. It was as if they were truly living in a different reality, one where they could abandon their father on his 50th birthday for a secret beach trip and then check in with a text message that you would send to a distant cousin. I stared at the words, a fresh wave of cold anger washing over me. They really believed it, didn't they? They really thought I wouldn't notice, or if I did, that I wouldn't care. I set the phone down and did not answer. An hour later, it buzzed again. This time, it was Leo, my son. He wasn't asking how I was. He wasn't mentioning my birthday. His text read, "Hey, can you check if I left my laptop charger in my old room?" The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of it was almost comical. He had the audacity to ask me for a favor, to treat me like a house sitter, while he was living it up on a vacation paid for with money I'd earmarked for his future. The message was so profoundly self-absorbed, it served as a perfect exhibit for the case I was building in my mind. Once again, I did not answer. As the evening wore on, the tone of the messages began to shift. My silence, it seemed, was finally starting to penetrate their bubble of bliss. A text from Eleanor appeared. "Are you mad about something?" The question was so laughably inadequate for the situation that it solidified my resolve. Mad? Mad was a mild disagreement over dinner. This was something else entirely, something for which our shared vocabulary had no words. Then Chloe called, twice, letting it ring and ring before it went to voicemail. Leo sent another, stranger message. "Mom's freaking out a little. Can you just text her back?" They still didn't get it. They thought my silence was a tactic, a petty fit of pique that could be solved by me simply texting back. They weren't concerned that they had hurt me. They were concerned that their fun was being interrupted by their mother's anxiety. I watched the phone light up with their frantic, clumsy attempts to restore the status quo, and I felt nothing but a grim sense of validation. Instead of answering them, I did something else. I drove to the grocery store. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I walked to the bakery section and picked out a small, generic birthday cake, the kind with overly sweet frosting and garish decorations. It was the saddest-looking cake I had ever seen. I took it home, set it on my empty kitchen table, and then I did something I hadn't done in months. I posted a photo on Instagram. It was a simple picture, just me, sitting alone at the table with the pathetic little cake in front of me. I made sure the date stamp was clearly visible in the corner. I didn't use a filter. I didn't add a clever caption or any tags. I just let the image speak for itself. It was my quiet, devastating rebuttal to their sun-drenched selfies and cheerful video clips. It was my receipt for the pain they had inflicted. That is when the dam broke. At exactly 9:44 p.m., my phone, which had been buzzing intermittently, began to vibrate and light up with a frantic, relentless intensity. It was as if my single, silent photo had detonated a bomb in their fantasy world. Message after message began pouring in. Eleanor was in a full-blown panic. Leo was, for the first time, expressing something that resembled actual concern. Chloe was sending tearful voice messages that I didn't bother to listen to. By midnight, I had counted them. 47 desperate messages flooding my phone across every platform imaginable. Texts, WhatsApp messages, Instagram DMs, even a few frantic emails. The final one I read before turning in was from Eleanor. "We're coming home tomorrow. Please be there. We need to talk." We'll talk, I thought to myself as I got ready for bed. We are definitely going to talk. But first, I needed to make one more stop in the morning. I needed to pick up new locks for all the doors. Some lessons, I decided, shouldn't be written in the sand where they can be washed away. They needed to be carved in stone. I did not sleep that night. I just sat on our back deck, the cool night air doing little to calm the storm inside me, and watched the messages pour in. It was a fascinating and horrifying spectacle. The first message from Eleanor, at 9:44 p.m., was a simple, almost timid, "Arthur, are you there?" By the time the 47th message arrived at 3:28 in the morning, she had escalated to a frantic, desperate plea. "Please, just answer me. I'm freaking out." For 25 years of marriage, I had never once deliberately ignored my wife when she was worried. Even during our most heated arguments, I always picked up the phone, always answered the call. But as I sat there, watching her digital panic unfold, I realized there is a first time for everything. The most surreal part was the contrast. With one thumb, I could scroll through their panicked texts, and with the other, I could scroll through their Instagram feed, a gallery of their joyous escape. The dissonance was staggering. There was Eleanor, typing, "Arthur, please, I'm worried," while her profile picture showed her grinning at a beachfront restaurant just a few hours earlier. There was Leo, asking if I was okay, just below a photo of him proudly posing on a jet ski he had rented that afternoon. There were tearful, choked-up voice messages from Chloe, sent from a poolside cabana where she had been sipping cocktails hours before. Their concern did not feel genuine. It felt like the panic of a teenager who has been caught throwing a party while their parents were away. Around 5 in the morning, I went inside and made coffee. Then I began methodically documenting everything. I turned my printer on, and for the next hour, the quiet hum of the machine filled the house as I printed every screenshot, every bank statement, every text thread. I organized it all in a neat folder. It sounds clinical, almost crazy, but it helped me. It transformed their ephemeral digital betrayal into a stack of cold, hard evidence. On the kitchen counter, the new deadbolt and doorknob set I had bought that morning sat in its plastic packaging. I wasn't sure yet if I would actually install it. That felt like crossing a definitive line, and a small part of me, a foolishly hopeful part, was not ready for that yet. The first call from Marcus came at 7:15 a.m. I watched his name flash on the screen and let it go to voicemail. He left a 2-minute message that began with a tone of strained paternal concern and ended with him accusing me of behaving like a child. It was classic Marcus. He had always thought I was not good enough for his daughter, always making little digs about my modest house or my reliable 10-year-old truck. His words were code, a thinly veiled judgment that I was not as successful as he had wanted for Eleanor. I went to work, performed my duties like any other day, and came home. The messages continued their relentless assault. "Dad, this isn't funny anymore," from Leo. "Daddy, please just text back so we know you're alive," from Chloe. And then one from Serena. "Hey, Arthur, everyone's worried about you. Whatever you're upset about, this isn't the way to handle it. Grow up." That one, from her, almost made me break my silence. But then I remembered her comment about workaholic husbands, and I held fast. That evening, I finished building my financial firewall. I called the credit card companies, and with a calm, steady voice, removed Eleanor as an authorized user on my 2 main accounts. I logged into our mortgage portal and set up the next payment to be drawn from my new separate account. Then I did something that surprised even me with its cold precision. I created a new spreadsheet. I spent 2 hours combing through a decade of our financial records, breaking down our entire household economy with cold, hard percentages. The numbers that emerged on the screen told a story that was stark and undeniable. 82% of our joint expenses were paid from my income. 94% of our retirement savings had come from my contributions. 100% of the kids' college funds were from me. Looking at our joint account history, I could see that most of Eleanor's deposits from her part-time job went right back out to pay for hair appointments, lunches with Serena, and what she vaguely termed household necessities, which somehow always included expensive candles and decorative pillows that no one was ever allowed to actually use. The bitterness of it all finally had a name, and it was written in the language of numbers. Around midnight, while digging through an old phone backup on our shared cloud drive, I found it. I found the thing that snuffed out the last flickering ember of hope that this was all some colossal misunderstanding. It was a text thread between Eleanor and her sister, Serena, from 2 weeks earlier. Eleanor: should we even tell Arthur about the trip? Serena: why bother? He'll just complain about the cost. Eleanor: true, LOL. It's not like he ever pays attention to anything but work anyway. Serena: he probably won't notice until the weekend. Eleanor: if that's soon. That was it. That was the moment something inside me permanently hardened. It wasn't just a joke for social media. It was their genuine, privately held belief. They had discussed my irrelevance, my invisibility, and decided it was a feature, not a bug. It was the justification for their deceit. The cold, hard numbers on my spreadsheet told the story of my financial contributions, but these texts, these casual, cruel words, told the story of my emotional erasure. By day 4 of their vacation, as my silence continued, their messages took on a new, predictable tone: anger. The feigned concern and panicked pleas evaporated, replaced by indignation and accusation. Leo texted me: Dad, WTF, Mom's been crying all night. What is your problem? Eleanor sent a message that read: I don't know what game you're playing, but this is cruel, Arthur. Even Marcus weighed in again with an email, its subject line a simple, damning indictment. You're proving exactly what I've always thought about you: selfish and immature. I read their words and felt nothing. Their anger was the desperate flailing people who were used to being in control, who had suddenly and inexplicably found that all the levers of power had stopped working. On day 5, the panic returned, as they realized I was still maintaining absolute radio silence. We're cutting the vacation short, Eleanor texted. Coming home tomorrow. Please be there. Chloe sent a message that read: Dad, I'm scared. Something happened to you. Leo's read: if you're doing this on purpose, it's seriously effed up. I still did not respond, but I did begin to make preparations for their return. I moved Eleanor's few remaining personal items, her toothbrush, her favorite coffee mug, into the guest room. I changed the Wi-Fi password and installed a new passcode lock on my personal computer, securing the folder of evidence I had so carefully compiled. They were small, seemingly petty things, but they were messages. They were quiet statements that the home they were returning to was not the one they had left. You cannot pretend nothing happened when the fundamental rules of entry have changed. That night, wrestling with a complex mix of anger and sorrow, I finally listened to one of the voice messages Chloe had sent. Her voice was choked with tears, thick with a desperation that sounded genuine. She said she was sorry about my birthday. So sorry. She claimed she had wanted to call me, but that her grandma, Diana, had insisted it would ruin the big surprise they were planning for my return. She said she felt weird about the whole trip, but everyone, her mother and her grandparents, had made her feel like she was overreacting. She confessed that Marcus had paid for most of it, framing it as a vital family bonding experience. For a moment, just for a moment, I nearly called her back. The father in me, the man who had held her as a baby and taught her to ride a bike, wanted to tell her it was okay, to soothe her tears. But then I remembered her face in those beach photos, grinning broadly, without a shadow of a care in the world. She did not look like someone being held hostage on a family trip. She looked happy. 20-year-olds are not children. They are adults who make their own choices. Her apology was real, I believed that. But it was the apology of someone sorry they got caught, not of someone who understood the depth of the wound they had helped inflict. The call was never made. The morning they were due to return, I woke with a sense of grim purpose. There was no more debate, no more hesitation. I retrieved the new deadbolt set from the kitchen counter, got my tools from the garage, and methodically began to change the lock on the front door. The scrape of the screwdriver and the solid clink of the old hardware being removed were satisfying sounds in the quiet house. I wasn't installing it to lock them out of my life forever. I am not that petty. I was installing it to make a point. They could not just breeze back into this house, back into my life, and pretend that nothing had happened. They would have to stop. They would have to ring the doorbell. They would have to face me and acknowledge what they had done before taking another step inside the world I had built for them. After taking the day off from work, I waited. At 2:47 p.m., a text from Eleanor arrived, stating their flight had landed. At 4:32 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of an Uber pulling into the driveway. I watched from the living room window as they got out, a collection of tired, sunburned figures. I could hear the rumble of luggage wheels on the concrete and the low murmur of their voices. Then a moment of confused silence, which I correctly guessed was the exact instant Eleanor's key failed to turn in the new lock. A few seconds later, the doorbell rang, a chime that signaled the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new, uncertain one. I took my time answering it. When I finally opened the door, I was met with a perfect tableau of exhaustion and forced pleasantry. There they were, trying to manufacture casual smiles on their tired faces. Eleanor was in front, clutching a ridiculously oversized gift bag that had clearly been purchased at an airport gift shop. Leo stood behind her, his eyes darting everywhere but at me, the picture of adolescent shame. Chloe looked like she was on the verge of tears, her face pale beneath her tan. And behind them all, like twin statues of judgment, stood Marcus and Diana, their faces etched with matching expressions of disapproval. I did not smile, I did not speak. I just stood there, filling the doorway, a silent and unmovable object. Eleanor tried to speak first, her voice unnaturally bright. She started with a rambling story about how worried they had been, how they had called hospitals, how they'd heroically cut their trip short because they were so deeply concerned about me. She then tried to pivot, launching into a clumsy, transparent lie about how the trip had been a pre-birthday celebration and that they were going to surprise me with a special dinner upon their return. I let her finish, her words hanging in the tense air between us. I did not say a word. Instead, I slowly pulled out my phone, unlocked it, opened Instagram, and held up the screen so they could all see it. On the display was Leo's post, the smiling family photo, and the caption that had started it all. "He won't even notice we're gone. LOL." The silence that followed was truly something special. Leo stared at his own shoes, as if they held the secrets to the universe. Chloe's trembling lip finally gave way, and she started to actually cry. Eleanor's face crumpled, and she tried to grab my phone, a move I easily sidestepped. That's when Marcus stepped forward, his voice booming with forced authority. "This is ridiculous," he said. "They need to come inside so we can talk about this like adults." I finally spoke, my voice low and cold. I looked past my wife and children and directly at him. "You are not welcome in my house today, Marcus," I said. "You can drop their luggage and leave." The look on his face was worth 1,000 words. It was the expression of a man who had just been slapped, a man utterly stunned that someone, for what was likely the first time in his life, had told him no. He just stood there sputtering on my doorstep as I stared him down without blinking. Diana tried to intervene, suggesting they were all tired and maybe they could talk tomorrow. I agreed that tomorrow might work for a conversation with my family, but not with him. Not ever again. After they finally left, defeated and silent, I let Eleanor, Leo, and Chloe step inside. The house immediately felt different with them in it. It was smaller, and the air was thick with a tension you could cut with a knife. Eleanor was the first to notice. She walked past the living room, toward our bedroom, then stopped abruptly and turned back, her face a mask of confusion. "Arthur, where are my things?" she asked, her voice sharp with accusation. "What have you done?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I walked to the kitchen table, the site of so many family breakfasts and mundane conversations, and placed the folder I had prepared on its surface. I opened it and began laying out the contents, piece by piece. The glossy prints of their smiling Instagram photos, the stark black and white bank statements with the withdrawals highlighted, the damning text message threads, the spreadsheet with its neat columns and cold, hard percentages, detailing the financial reality of our lives. I laid it all out like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. When everything was displayed, I looked up at them, my wife and my 2 children, and I asked them the one question that had been burning in my mind for days. "When, exactly?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Did I become so worthless to this family?" Eleanor tried to regain control, to spin the narrative back in her favor. "Oh, Arthur, don't be so dramatic," she said, attempting a dismissive wave of her hand. "It was just a vacation. We were going to celebrate your birthday properly when we got back." I said nothing. I just slid a single piece of paper across the table toward her. It was the printout of her text conversation with Serena, the one where they discussed whether it was even worth telling me about the trip. The one where they laughed about how I would never even notice they were gone. I watched as she read the words, her own words, and the color drained from her face. She went white. The lie died on her lips. Leo stepped up next, trying to downplay his role. "It was just a joke, Dad," he mumbled, staring at the table. "My caption, 'Everyone exaggerates on social media,' it doesn't mean anything." I had prepared for that too. I pushed another set of screenshots toward him. It was a collection of his comments from the past year, little digs and jokes at my expense that I had never acknowledged. Posts where he'd mocked my taste in music, complained about me being boring, or called me a typical dad to his friends. "It seems to be a joke you tell pretty often, Leo," I said calmly. His excuses withered and dried up under the weight of the evidence. Chloe just stood there, crying silently, her hands covering her face. But even through her tears, the final, ugliest piece of the puzzle tumbled out. "It was supposed to include you," she sobbed, her voice muffled. "The trip. We planned it months ago, and you were supposed to come." I looked at her, then back at Eleanor. What is she talking about? Chloe continued, the words spilling out in a torrent of guilt. "Grandpa Marcus, he told Mom. He said it would be better as a family reset. He said it would be better without your negative energy bringing everyone down." And there it was, the heart of it, the ugly, rotten core of the whole affair. I had not been forgotten. I had not been overlooked. I had been deliberately, specifically, and maliciously excluded. My negative energy, the very quality that manifested as 60-hour work weeks, responsible financial planning, and a deep-seated worry about the future, had been deemed a detriment to their fun. My presence was a burden. My very nature was the thing they needed a vacation from. By 7 o'clock, we had reached the truth that nobody had wanted to say out loud. For years, they had been building a story about me in their minds. Arthur the boring provider, Arthur the absent father, Arthur the workaholic who wouldn't know how to have fun anyway. It was a convenient narrative, a comfortable fiction that made it easy for them to justify treating me like a piece of furniture, and they had convinced themselves it was true. They believed I wouldn't care, that I wouldn't feel it. And the most painful part was, they were not entirely wrong. I had let it happen. I let that ugly truth hang in the air for a long moment, letting them all absorb the reality of it. The narrative they had built about me, the one that made it so easy to justify their actions, had been exposed for the self-serving fiction it was. I had been quiet when I should have spoken up. I had let work become my identity while they built a life that revolved around their own wants. But I was speaking up now. I have moved my salary to a new, separate bank account, I said, my voice cutting through the tense silence. It was a simple statement of fact. This house, the one I have paid for all these years, will have the mortgage and utilities paid from that account for the next 3 months. That should be enough time for you, Eleanor, to figure out your next steps. I turned to Chloe, whose sobs had quieted to silent, racking shudders. I will, of course, continue to support your education, I told her gently, but the money will be paid directly to the university. It will no longer pass through any joint accounts. Finally, I looked back at my wife. You all have 3 months, I stated, leaving no room for negotiation. 3 months to either commit to rebuilding this marriage on entirely new, honest terms, or 3 months to prepare for a divorce. The choice is yours. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Leo shot up from his chair, his face red with anger. "This is so unfair," he yelled, before storming out of the house and slamming the front door behind him. Chloe fled to her room, the sound of her own door clicking shut echoing his departure. Eleanor, however, did not move. She just sat at the table, her hands limp in her lap, staring at the stack of evidence I had compiled. She looked like someone who had just been informed that the sky was in fact green, and that her entire life had been based on a lie she had told herself. Around midnight, long after the sounds of crying from Chloe's room had ceased, my phone pinged with one final message for the night. It was from Eleanor, from the guest room down the hall. "I never meant for any of this to happen," the text read. "The trip was supposed to be your gift, some time alone to relax. We were going to surprise you with something special when we got back. I don't know how things got so twisted." I read the message 3 times, and with each reading, my sense of disbelief grew more profound. Even now, even after being confronted with irrefutable proof of her lies and deceit, she was still spinning, still trying to rewrite reality into a narrative where she was the well-intentioned victim of circumstance. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I typed out my response slowly and carefully, choosing each word with precision. "I have the receipts, Eleanor, all 47 of them, plus about 100 more you don't even know about yet. The time for lies is over." Then, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I turned off my phone. I walked into my bedroom and went to sleep in my own bed. The house was not empty, but I was alone. Yet, for the first time in days, I did not feel lonely. There is a difference. Tomorrow would bring hard conversations and even harder decisions, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that for the first time in 25 years, those decisions would finally be on my terms. I woke up at 4:17 a.m. to the sound of someone crying. It was a muffled, heartbreaking sound, and it was coming from inside the house. It took me a moment to place it, to realize it was Eleanor, weeping in the guest room down the hall. And the strangest thing happened. I felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, not even a shred of guilt. It was just a sound, distant and disconnected from me, like a car alarm going off down the street. The part of me that would have once rushed to comfort her was gone, replaced by a profound and empty stillness. For those asking for an update, it has now been 2 weeks since my family returned from their beach vacation. 2 weeks of living in a cold war of our own making. The time has been marked by awkward breakfasts eaten in silence, tense dinners where the only sound was the clinking of silverware, and the constant hurried whispers of phone calls from behind closed doors. The morning after the big confrontation, I had expected some kind of dramatic scene. Tearful apologies, perhaps, desperate promises to change. That is not what happened at all. Instead, Eleanor came downstairs at 7:30 a.m., made a pot of coffee, just like it was any other normal day, and then turned to me with a look of weary impatience. "Did you get it out of your system yet?" she asked. As if my reaction to years of emotional neglect and a profound betrayal was some childish tantrum that simply needed to run its course. I just looked at her for a long moment, letting the absurdity of her question hang in the air. Then, without a word, I slid my phone across the kitchen counter. It was still open to the screenshots of her text messages with Serena, the ones where they debated whether I would even notice they were gone. She stared at the screen, her own words displayed in black and white, and then she tried a new and truly astonishing angle. "My phone must have been hacked," she said, her voice thin and unconvincing. "I never wrote those things. Someone must have used my account." At exactly 7:43 in the morning, I had a moment of terrible clarity. I realized that my wife of 25 years would rather invent an elaborate and frankly insane conspiracy theory than simply admit that she had done something callous and cruel. That was the moment I knew, with chilling certainty, that the woman I married was gone, if she had ever truly been there at all. That is when I handed her the printed bank statements. I showed her every highlighted withdrawal from our joint account that had funded their trip. I laid out the statements from her secret credit card, the one she had hidden from me for 3 years. I walked her through the math, showing her how I had supported this family, our family, for decades, while she had quietly amassed $13,000 in hidden debt. Do you want to know the craziest part? She did not even seem that concerned about the money itself. Her main reaction was a dismissive little shrug. "Marcus will help me pay it off," she said, as if her father's wealth was a magic wand that could erase her deceit. Then she had the audacity to try and turn it back on me. "You are being so petty, focusing on dollars and cents," she said, her voice rising, "when the real issue here has always been your workaholism. Isn't that something? I am the villain for working 60-hour weeks to pay for our life, including the secret shopping habits that she hid from me." The logic was so twisted, so profoundly self-serving, it felt like I was arguing with a stranger who just happened to be living in my house. The kids were a different story, each a unique flavor of the family's dysfunction. Leo showed up around noon on that first day, looking hungover and spoiling for a fight. He stormed into the kitchen, defensive and aggressive, and immediately started in on how I was overreacting. "It was just a stupid social media post, Dad," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "Are you serious right now? You're being so toxic, making such a big deal about everything." Toxic. The word, coming from him, was almost funny. Instead of yelling back, I picked up my phone and showed him his social media feed. I showed him the comments from his friends, the ones that said things like, LOL, your dad sounds like my dad, total boomer energy. And, bro, just tell him you're busy when he tries to hang. That's what I do. What kind of man mocks his own father online to look cool in front of his friends? I asked him, my voice dangerously even. What kind of son takes $4,000 from his father and then turns around and spends that same amount partying at a beach resort 2 weeks later? He did not have any good answers. He just mumbled something about how I did not understand how social media works before turning and leaving. He has not been back in 5 days. Chloe was different. She actually apologized, her words sincere and filled with remorse. She said she felt immense pressure from Diana and Marcus to go along with the trip. She confessed that she had wanted to call me on my birthday, but Eleanor told her I was probably too busy with work to talk anyway. I believe her, for the most part, but I also saw her in those beach photos, grinning through sunset cocktail hours that she is not even legally old enough to attend. She did not exactly look like she was being tortured by guilt. So yes, while I am still paying for her college tuition, I am now paying it directly to the school, not into a joint account where money has a mysterious habit of vanishing. On the 3rd day after their return, things escalated dramatically. Marcus showed up, unannounced, at 6:15 in the evening. He walked right into my kitchen without knocking because Eleanor had obviously given him the new door code. I was standing by the microwave, heating up leftovers for dinner. He started in immediately, his voice loud and accusatory, telling me how I was being unreasonable, how I was destroying this family over a simple misunderstanding. I did not yell. I did not throw him out. I just calmly turned to him and asked, "How much did the resort cost, Marcus?" He puffed up his chest, indignant. "That is not the point," he sputtered. "I think it is the point," I said. "I'm asking you a direct question. Exactly how much did you spend to take my family on a vacation without me?" That is when he dropped the bombshell. $8,600, he said. The number meant to sound impressive. For 5 people, for 5 days. I did the math in my head. That is over $300 per person per day. I have never spent that much on any vacation in my entire life. Our family trips were always budget-friendly camping weekends and road trips. "Do you know how much money I have saved for Chloe's college fund?" I asked him. He did not answer. $25,000, I told him. Scraped together $500 at a time, over years and years. Money that could have gone to fancy vacations or a better car, but I chose your granddaughter's future instead. Then I looked him straight in the eye. "How much have you contributed to her education, Marcus?" His face went beet red. He started sputtering about how that was not the point, how he created opportunities for the family in other ways. Opportunities, I thought, like teaching them that it is okay to exclude and disrespect the person who pays for their entire lives. "You have 30 seconds to leave my house," I said, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "After that, I am calling the police to report you for trespassing." He left at 6:27 p.m. Eleanor absolutely lost it after her father left. The moment the door closed behind him, she turned on me, her face a mask of fury. "How could you?" she shrieked, her voice trembling with rage. "How could you be so cruel to my father? In our own home?" She didn't see a man who had been insulted and disrespected. She saw a son-in-law who had finally, unforgivably challenged the patriarch. "You're just jealous of him," she accused. "That's what this is all about. The real reason you're so upset is because you could never provide the kind of experiences for our family that he could." And you know what? There was a bitter grain of truth in that. I have never had Marcus's money, and I never will. But as I stood there, taking the full force of her anger, I realized I'd had something else. I'd had Marcus's time. 25 years of it. Time that I had spent working 60-hour weeks to build something real and lasting for us, while he was off enjoying an early retirement funded by inherited wealth. He could provide expensive experiences. I had provided a life. And she was standing here, telling me my contribution was the lesser of the two. By the end of that first week, the battle lines had been definitively drawn. Eleanor moved in with her sister, Serena, on a temporary basis. Leo stopped answering my texts completely. The family split neatly into factions. Eleanor's siblings and parents rallied around her, posting vague but supportive messages on social media about the importance of standing by family during difficult times. My own sister, who lives 3 states away, sent me a care package containing a bottle of good whiskey and a short note that said, "I always thought Eleanor was kind of a princess." Then, the financial reality of our new arrangement began to hit home. 10 days after returning from her trip, Eleanor called me in a full-blown panic. "My credit card was just declined," she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and accusation. She had been at some boutique, no doubt, trying to soothe her problems with a purchase she could no longer afford. "Are you going to keep punishing me by withholding money?" I explained it to her calmly, the way you might speak to a child who does not understand a complex rule. "I am not withholding anything, Eleanor," I said. "I am simply separating our finances. Your income is still yours, and my income is now mine. The joint account we shared has exactly enough money in it to cover 3 months of mortgage and utility payments. After that, we will either have a new arrangement or we will have separate lives." That is when she started crying. But these were not the performative, angry tears from our fight about her father. These were real tears. And as I listened to her sobs over the phone, I realized with a sickening certainty that she was not crying for our broken marriage. She was not crying over my feelings or the fact that our family was being torn apart. She was crying about the money. At 11:43 that night, my phone pinged with a text from a number I had not heard from directly in days. It was Marcus. His message was just 4 words long. "Let's discuss a settlement." I stared at the message, a grim smile touching my lips. He was already trying to solve this the only way he knew how, with money. But I did not answer. There was nothing to settle yet. No divorce papers had been filed, and no lawyers had been officially retained, though I had already had 3 consultations. This was just a family in absolute freefall, finally being forced to face gravity after pretending for years that they could float above reality on my dime. And a settlement could not fix that. 2 weeks into this strange new normal, something entirely unexpected happened. Leo showed up at the house. It was 8:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, and he looked terrible. He was unshowered, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he had the haunted look of someone who had been up all night wrestling with demons. He wasn't there to apologize, not exactly. He was there because he had finally done some math of his own. His new apartment, the one I had helped him secure the down payment for, was turning out to be a financial nightmare for him. It turned out that the monthly costs were significantly more than he had calculated. "It's the utilities," he mumbled, slumping into a chair at the kitchen table. "And the internet and groceries, all the little things. All the little things that had magically appeared at home his entire life, paid for by a father he had so recently mocked. The vacation, too, had cost him far more than he expected. He confessed that he'd put all the excursions and drinks on his own credit card, assuming he could just figure it all out later. now later had arrived, and he was drowning. A part of me, a small wounded part, wanted to tell him that this was a valuable life lesson in personal responsibility and then sent him on his way. It would have been easy to do. It might have even felt good for a moment. But the dad in me, the part that had loved this boy since the moment he was born, just could not do it. Instead, I got up and made him breakfast. While he ate, I opened my laptop and created a new blank spreadsheet. I taught him how to make a basic budget, showing him exactly what things actually cost in the real world. We listed out his rent, his car insurance, his phone bill. We estimated his grocery costs, his gas, his utilities. It was the world I had been silently managing for him, for all of them, for decades, while he was online posting about what a clueless boomer his dad was. By the time we were finished, he looked completely shell-shocked. The numbers on the screen were a harsh reality check, but I could see it was more than that. He was seeing, maybe for the very first time, what I actually did for this family. He was seeing the complex, tedious, and constant work that went on behind the scenes to provide the comfortable life he had always taken for granted. He did not say he was sorry, not in so many words, but he did something that hit me harder than any apology ever could have. He picked up his phone, and right there at the kitchen table, he deleted all of his social media apps. "I need to get my head straight," he said, his voice quiet and hoarse, "without all the constant noise." Then he looked at me, his eyes filled with a new, unfamiliar humility. Can I come over on Sundays?" he asked, "for you to help me figure out this adulting stuff?" Progress, I thought to myself, feeling the first genuine, uncomplicated flicker of hope in weeks. I guess this is progress. Eleanor has been a different story entirely. After the initial shock wore off, she shifted into full damage control mode. She began calling our mutual friends to offer her carefully curated version of events. She posted a long, vague update on Facebook about healing from unexpected life changes, written in a way that made it sound like I had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. Her sister, Serena, has been her primary bullhorn, telling anyone who will listen that I am having a classic midlife crisis and that I am being financially abusive by cutting Eleanor off from my income. The vacation, they now claim, was always intended to be a gift for me, not an exclusion of me. I have not bothered to counter any of it. The people who truly know me have seen through the performance immediately. The rest are not worth my energy. Chloe has been caught in the middle of it all, a child of a quiet, cold war. She feels guilty for going on the trip, guilty for still wanting a relationship with me, and guilty for being angry at her mother. I have tried to make it clear to her that she does not need to choose a side, that I will always be her dad regardless of what happens between me and her mother, and that her future is secure. 3 weeks after their return, Eleanor came by to talk for real. She sat at the kitchen counter where we had shared breakfast for 20 years and asked if I was really willing to throw away our marriage over one mistake. I pulled out my phone and showed her the 47 messages again. "Show me the one," I said softly. "Show me the one that wishes me a happy birthday. Show me the one that apologizes for leaving me behind. Show me a single message that shows any real concern for me, beyond the fear of getting caught." She could not point to a single one. Then I asked her the question that had been burning inside me for weeks. When did I become so invisible that you thought I wouldn't notice or care? What she said next finally broke through all the lies. "It wasn't sudden," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. She said that for years, maybe even a decade, she had felt like we were living parallel lives. She said that she had tried to connect, but I was always working, always tired, always more focused on providing for the family than on being present with them. And eventually, she just adapted. She built a life that did not require my active participation. And that hit hard because I knew there was some truth in it. I have prioritized providing over being present. I have missed school events for work. I have been too tired for date nights after 60-hour weeks. But I also coached Leo's Little League team. I helped Chloe build her science fair projects. I mowed the lawn and fixed the leaky faucets and kept the roof over our heads. I showed up in all the ways I knew how. They just weren't the ways she wanted. "Is there any chance for us?" she asked at midnight, her eyes pleading. "Can you forgive me?" "I honestly don't know," I told her, the truth raw and painful. Forgiveness might be possible one day, but forgetting is not. Trust, once it is broken like this, leaves scars, even if it heals. She moved the last of her things to Serena's place the next day. It has been 1 month now since my 50th birthday. 1 month since I came home to that empty house and discovered just how invisible I had become. Some days I am angry, and some days I am just tired. But most days, I am finding a strange new peace in being visible to myself again. I have started swimming at the community center 3 mornings a week. I go to happy hour with the guys from work sometimes. Leo comes by every Sunday for his adulting lessons, and we cook dinner and talk about things that matter. Chloe splits her time between her mother's new place and mine, navigating the new family geography with as much grace as a 20-year-old can muster. Eleanor texts daily, mostly practical questions about bills, which I answer. I leave the rest on read. Yesterday, I received a letter from a divorce attorney representing her. The requests were reasonable, which surprised me. As for me, I finally changed my social media status from married to it's complicated. Because it is. Life is complicated. But one thing is not complicated anymore. I am not invisible. Not to my family, not to my friends, and most importantly, not to myself. And that visibility, I have decided, was worth the price of a beach vacation I never got to take. Arthur's incredible journey from heartbreak to empowerment is a powerful lesson for anyone who has ever felt invisible or taken for granted. For 25 years, he was the silent provider, the bedrock of his family, only to discover on his 50th birthday that his worth had been completely erased in their eyes. This story is a masterclass in the importance of setting boundaries, reclaiming your self-respect, and finding the strength to demand better. It teaches us that you cannot let others define your value. You must be the one to recognize your contributions and, when necessary, draw a line in the sand. His story proves that sometimes the most difficult confrontations lead to the most profound and necessary self-discovery. If this story of raw emotion and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Every subscription helps us continue to find and share powerful narratives like this one. We'd love to see how far these stories travel, so please drop a comment below letting us know what region or country you're watching from. Thank you for being a part of our community.